on avait dit à M. Louis que la conférence serait traduite parce qu'on trouvait trop dommage que voilà, je pense qu'une majorité de l'assistance dont je fais partie, l'anglais c'est quand même pas non plus notre fort en France. Donc voilà, on va lui laisser la parole pour la conférence.
Je fais la petite présentation. Ouais. Donc ça va être Bonjour, donc je vais commencer par introduire très rapidement Roger Ulrich pour ceux qui ne le connaissent pas, bien que je pense que beaucoup de gens parmi vous ont lu ou cité même sa fameuse étude de 1984, les deux précédentes présentations en ont fait état. Donc on peut dire qu'à l'échelle internationale, Roger Ulrich est le chercheur le plus souvent cité dans ce domaine de la conception d'établissements de santé fondés sur les preuves, donc ce qu'il a appelé dans les années 90-2000 le evidence-based design. Et en fait, il s'agit de documenter les effets du design de la construction sur la santé en utilisant des méthodologies qui viennent du monde médical, du evidence-based medicine, et les appliquer pour pouvoir apporter la démonstration que la conception des bâtiments, intérieurs et extérieurs, influence les choses comme la durée des séjours, le temps de guérison, la prise de médicaments et plein d'autres éléments dont il va nous parler. Pour retracer rapidement sa carrière de plus d'une quarantaine d'années maintenant, il a donc en 1993 cofondé et dirigé le Center for Health Systems and Design à l'université Texas A&M. Donc c'est un centre qui est co-hébergé par la faculté de médecine et la faculté d'architecture. Un moment aussi important a été en 2005-2006 où il a été appelé par le National Health Service en Angleterre pour piloter, pour superviser la création d'une vague de nouveaux hôpitaux qui était très demandée puisqu'il y avait un gros problème d'infection dans le pays, d'infection avec des effets mortels. Et donc il a été appelé pendant 2 ans pour aider, pour superviser ces nouvelles constructions. Et puis actuellement, il est en semi-retraite très active en Suède, d'où est originaire sa femme, et il est professeur d'architecture donc au Center for Healthcare Building Research, donc de la recherche sur la construction en établissement de santé, à l'Université de technologie de Chalmers en Suède, et aussi professeur adjoint d'architecture à l'Université d'Aalborg au Danemark. Donc voilà, il va nous parler de certaines de ses études anciennes, mais aussi récentes, notamment sur l'épuisement professionnel chez les infirmières, qui peut être aidé par notamment le jardin. Donc voilà, il a partagé des choses avec nous plus en détail. Je lui passe la parole donc, sur son thème du jardin et la nature dans les établissements de santé.
Merci. Can you hear? Let's see. Mesdames et messieurs, je suis très honoré d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui. Le sujet de ce colloque sur le rôle de la nature et des jardins dans les soins psychiatriques est très importante et intervient au bon moment. Je suis très impressionné par le travail clinique et des recherches menées ici à Saint-Étienne et par les superbes jardins créés pour les patients. Malheureusement, ma connaissance de français est limitée, donc je vais maintenant devoir continuer en anglais. Les jardins de la nature. As professor, as Dr. Franz Prange indicated earlier, she described biophilia theory as originated by Edward O. Wilson. And this covers some of the same ground. A basic idea is that humans have a strong tendency to respond positively to nature including plants, flowers, water, and other living things, but we have no such responding capability, but positive responding to nature has a partly genetic basis. It's not just learned from our culture, it's shared across cultures. So we might say that Monet was basically a biophilia artist of a sort.
On peut dire que Monet était un biophile de la sorte.
Why should nature reduce stress? Stress recovery theory extended biophilia theory by proposing that a capability for rapid recovery from stress was so important for the survival of early humans that it favored acquiring a partly genetic proneness for stress recovery and restorative responses to nature. This theory, which has been developed over since about 1990 or even earlier, contends that modern humans, as a partly genetic carryover from evolution, have a proneness to derive stress reduction benefits from certain nature, such as vegetation or flowers, but also have a partly biological proneness to be afraid of certain nature, such as snakes and spiders that cause phobias, that cause people to visit psychiatrists.
À part évidemment les éléments tels que les serpents et les araignées qui peuvent créer des phobies.
This theory also holds we have no such proneness for acquiring positive responses in the same way to most modern built content, such as concrete, metal, or glass. And the key idea here is that nature should effectively reduce stress across quite different cultures. Yes, culture can have some role, but basically the implication is it doesn't matter if one is living in Hong Kong or the French countryside or Stockholm or Central Africa. We should be able to observe this capacity in humans.
Cette capacité humaine est observable dans différentes cultures, que l'on vient de Hong Kong ou de la campagne française.
A practical implication is that designing facilities with gardens and nature, that is, healthcare facilities of all types, may harness stress-reducing influences that are remnants or carryovers of evolution, resulting in more calming and healing environments. There is a growing body of research. In fact, there's considerable scientific research now concerning the beneficial effects of nature in somatic healthcare facilities. Only a few studies by comparison for psychiatric facilities.
Il y a eu énormément d'études menées sur le plan somatique par rapport aux bénéfices de la présence de la nature, mais très peu au niveau de la psychiatrie.
Much research has shown that confirms, consistent with stress recovery theory, that exposure to nature is associated, produces rapid and substantial recovery from stress. Also, several studies, perhaps 30 or 40, published in medical journals, have converged in showing that for somatic patients, looking at nature, being distracted by nature, reduces pain. It also, recent years, growing evidence shows that nature reduces feelings of anger. And this has considerable practical importance for example, designing modern high-stress workplaces where anger is a problem, somatic hospitals such as the emergency department where anger is a problem, or psychiatric facilities. And increased satisfaction. Here's an example from one of many, many studies done to show stress-reducing effects of nature. Here, volunteers who were not patients were first stressed in a laboratory, then exposed to a recovery stage consisting of a large screen with videotaped images and sound of different environments. As you can see, this is blood pressure. So blood pressure is increased during the stressor, and with nature, it comes down fast and completely. If one is watching people, not cars, behaving rather pleasantly on city streets with nice architecture but no nature, it's somewhat stress-reducing, but not nearly as effective as, for example, a park or garden. And if one looks at traffic, in fact, some studies show it increases stress.
Alors ce schéma explique du coup, avec un marqueur biologique tel que la pression artérielle, comment l'effet de l'exposition à la nature ou au trafic urbain ou simplement des piétons dans la rue, la durée d'exposition est donc mesurée et on voit que quand on est face à la nature, la pression descend et plus on est exposé, plus la pression descend.
So the stress-reducing effects are easily measured in a physiological sense across different body systems, ranging from the brain through the heart to levels of stress hormones, for example.
D'autres marqueurs biologiques comme l'esprit, le cœur, peuvent être des marqueurs biologiques témoignant de cet effet bénéfique de l'exposition à la nature.
These physiological changes, which occur, for example, in the brain within seconds, in the heart about 20 seconds, blood pressure a bit longer, these are accompanied by rapid changes in our feelings or emotional states.
Les changements sont observables d'une manière assez rapide, que ce soit au niveau de l'esprit, au niveau du cardiaque. Il y a un plus grand délai au niveau cardiaque, mais permettent effectivement de voir les effets au niveau du cerveau, comme étant les émotions, par exemple, que l'on voit sur le schéma.
In these data, following a mild laboratory stressor, people felt less fear from nature, considerably less anger, and levels of positive feelings soared.
Les sentiments de peur et de colère étaient bien diminués selon cette étude, et les sentiments positifs, par contre, étaient extrêmement augmentés.
When I say positive feelings, I refer to feelings such as pleasant or friendly.
Des sentiments positifs comme le plaisir ou se sentir dans l'amitié.
Oui, amical.
Amical.
Again, many studies have confirmed these findings. So, with this kind of evidence, it's become international practice in new somatic facilities to install nature, provide access to nature in ways that help to reduce stress, pain, increase satisfaction. This is a primary care clinic in Sweden.
C'est une clinique de soins en Suisse, en Suède, pardon.
Primary care in a suburb, a high-rise apartment suburb of Gothenburg, with a very high percentage of immigrants from Africa, from Afghanistan, and the Middle East.
Donc c'est un quartier avec des grands bâtiments élevés et une population migrante d'Afghanistan, du Moyen-Orient, d'Afrique.
These installations, they are numerous throughout this large facility, were intended to duplicate somewhat the notion of a paradise in Somalia.
Donc il y a plusieurs installations de ce genre dans toute la clinique et c'est censé représenter la vision du paradis dans un cadre somalien.
More than 25% of the patients are from Somalia.
Puisqu'il y a 25% environ qui sont des gens qui viennent de Somalie.
Remember the description of Savannah theory described by the first presenter. This looks like paradise for the Garden of Eden,
Ça me ressemble aussi au Jardin d'Éden,
or a notion of paradise in East Asian cultures.
dans les pays orientaux.
It works across diverse cultures.
Donc on revient à cette diversité culturelle qui est sensible de la même manière à la nature.
Many years ago, I did a study of the possible effects of a nature view on patients recovering from abdominal surgery, not psychiatric patients, in a U.S. hospital. These patients had rooms that were exactly the same. The patients were very similar in age and health status, the same surgery and staff. The only difference was that some had a 1-week recovery period looking at a brick wall. The others had a 1 week or a period looking at some trees outside the window.
Donc ça, cette étude qu'on connaît tous, elle se passait donc dans un hôpital américain avec des patients qui étaient en récupération d'une opération chirurgicale la même, les mêmes âges, les mêmes conditions, les mêmes conditions de santé, de staff. La seule différence, c'était la vue de leur chambre, un mur ou des arbres.
Those with the nature view had less pain, fewer minor complications such as persistent nausea or acute headaches.
Donc c'était les céphalées, les nausées qui étaient diminuées dans des complications mineures.
And those with the nature view had shorter hospital stays. An important finding that, frankly, I did not foresee prior to the study
Les résultats l'ont étonné.
was that there was quite a big effect of the nature view on pain, more than I anticipated. Here you can see the strength of different kinds of pain doses taken by the patients with the wall view compared to the nature view.
Donc les patients qui prenaient, donc s'ils avaient la vue sur la nature ou la vue sur le mur, et les différentes densités de paliers de médicaments.
The strong drugs here are very potent narcotics.
Donc dans la catégorie forte, on est sur des narcotiques très puissants, des morphines, palier 3.
Synthetic morphine, actually stronger, far stronger than morphine, administered by injection or transfusion.
Donc administré par injection.
So you can see those with nature views had about 1 injection a day of these very strong narcotics.
Donc une injection par jour pour les patients vus sur la nature. Et
The wall view patients required much more. There were also medium or moderate strength doses, also injections, also narcotic, but milder than the really strong ones.
donc le palier modéré, c'est le palier 2. Injection aussi, mais moins fort.
Again, the nature view takes far fewer than the wall view.
Donc, de nouveau, les patients avec vue sur la nature en prennent moins.
But look at the weak drugs. These are pills, not injections. They are not narcotic. You can buy them at the pharmacy without a prescription, and that is able to enable the wall view patient or the nature view patients to cope with pain.
Donc dans la catégorie faible, c'est des paliers 1, c'est des drogues qu'on peut trouver sans ordonnance. Et là, les patients avec vue sur la nature en prennent plus.
The much larger amount of potent narcotic pain drugs also helps to explain why patients with the wall view stayed longer.
Donc ça explique aussi le fait de prendre ces narcotiques de palier 3 explique que ces patients avec vue sur le mur restent plus longtemps à l'hôpital.
Many researchers from different countries using different methods have confirmed that experiencing nature, looking at it, listening to it, or better, sitting in a garden, is very effective
Donc
in
depuis,
reducing pain.
de nombreux chercheurs dans le monde entier ont pu répliquer ces résultats.
By the year 2000, enough research had appeared for somatic hospitals to motivate cost-conscious healthcare managers and decision makers, and in some cases politicians, to advocate or require that somatic patients have more exposure to nature.
De nombreuses études depuis les années 2000 ont démontré l'efficacité de l'exposition à la nature et a poussé les investisseurs à construire des jardins dans les milieux, dans les hôpitaux.
This American hospital room opened in about the year 2000, and the decision makers, the chief of the hospital and so on, and the finance people believed there was enough evidence to justify spending extra money so that each single bedroom, this is general level care, would have a view of a garden.
Dans les années 2000, cet hôpital donc a eu suffisamment d'éléments pouvant justifier l'investissement pour des chambres individuelles ayant vue sur jardin.
Now, what's interesting here, and for architects or constructors, is that is a rooftop garden. It is above 3 floors of laboratory space, which adds a lot to costs. And this is a real garden that's very heavy with dirt.
C'est un hôpital construit sur 3 étages, donc il a fallu investir sur des jardins situés sur les étages, donc au-dessus des toits.
What is the little hill doing there?
Qu'est-ce qu'une petite montagne fait là?
It's required by national U.S. regulations to protect the visual privacy of patients.
Ces frontières visuelles, en fait, sont définies par les lois américaines de confidentialité.
So, without that hill, no one could use the garden actively. This way permits then visitors, family members of patients, or patients who can walk, who are ambulatory, to be out in the garden, and of course, staff.
Ces barrières visuelles donc, sont nécessaires pour préserver l'intimité des patients qui sont dans les chambres et des utilisateurs du jardin.
With a large garden like this, many different rooms, spaces can benefit. This is a high-stress waiting room.
Alors, les bénéfices sont percevables également dans les salles d'attente.
And creative designers and architects saw these opportunities and have taken them very far.
Donc là, l'expérience a été poussée un petit peu plus loin dans une salle d'attente des urgences avec une vue sur le jardin.
Yes, this is what you can do with creative designers and people who believe in nature, but can be empowered by evidence to change things and get money for this. This is part of a very large urban hospital urgent care unit. It is carved into a rocky, steep hillside in a western northwest state, Oregon.
Il a été construit à flanc de colline dans l'Oregon avec des architectes très créatifs.
The stone is hard and stable, which created a good foundation so they could excavate around the areas that would have been without windows in this large waiting area and created a Japanese American-style garden.
Il a fallu extraire du coup des rochers devant les fenêtres pour pouvoir créer ce jardin à la japonaise devant les fenêtres pour offrir cette vue.
I was given a tour of the garden at midnight on a Saturday night. Now, you know what urgent care centers are like, departments on weekend nights when it's late, and there have been automobile accidents and fights, and people have drunk too much alcohol. You can almost see the stress in the atmosphere. Patients sitting there, family members. But in that one whole area, all the chairs were turned. Everyone was looking out in the spotlighted flowers and the waterfall.
J'ai pu visiter cette salle d'accueil des urgences à minuit, là où la tente bat son plein, où beaucoup d'accidentés arrivent. Et les sièges en fait sont orientés de façon à pouvoir observer la cascade. Et c'est vrai que du coup, l'ambiance créée fait vraiment diminuer le stress.
And even simulations of nature, mere pictures, can produce some measurable effects for short periods of time, such as reducing stress and reducing pain. And these are appropriate in medical situations where real nature cannot be provided.
Même la simulation en fait, de la représentation de la nature a des effets bénéfiques et peut être mesurée dans des endroits où on ne peut pas installer de jardin, comme le plafond de cette salle de réveil.
This is an example of evidence-based nature pictures installed on the ceiling in a new hospital in San Francisco, a big university hospital. And this is how patients, what they see as they awaken from anesthesia.
C'est ce que voient les patients quand ils se réveillent en salle de réveil dans un hôpital de San Francisco.
And the surgeons call it evidence-based. The question now, can we shift more toward gradually to psychiatric facilities? Is it possible that merely a picture of nature put in an older psychiatric ward or department can help improve patient outcomes? And this was the subject of a study a few years ago by one of my former students, who I'm proud of, Upali Nanda, and colleagues working at American hospitals. They studied units which contain elderly psychiatric patients, some with dementia, but also serious psychiatric problems. My understanding is these patients are becoming more numerous everywhere, including here in France.
C'est une étude par une ancienne étudiante dont il est très fier et qui s'est portée sur des patients psychiatriques avec des troubles de démence et des troubles psychiatriques assez importants, comme on peut en rencontrer aussi en France.
This ward was for patients who were particularly aggressive. They were prone to kicking, hitting, biting, for example.
Donc des comportements agressifs comme mordre, frapper, taper.
In a large community room, the walls were initially blank.
Donc dans la grande salle commune, les murs étaient blancs.
During some weeks, a large nature picture was put on the wall.
Donc durant les semaines, ils ont installé une photo de nature.
On other weeks, an abstract picture.
D'autres semaines, une photo d'un abstrait.
Different kinds of art. And other weeks, nothing on the wall.
Et d'autres semaines encore, rien du tout.
And the researchers measured the number of injections that were compulsory given when patients were being aggressive to calm them.
Donc on a ensuite mesuré le nombre d'injections sous contrainte faites aux patients.
Taking a very conservative approach economically, without anything on the wall was the worst. They spent $45,000 during that period, that nothing was on the wall.
Donc on dépense le plus d'argent en injection quand il n'y a rien sur les murs.
Abstract art itself was slightly better, but not very good.
L'art abstrait, c'est un peu mieux, mais pas super non plus.
Abstract pictures, such as Van Gogh, of nature, more effective than non-nature pictures, but again, not so effective.
Donc, des tableaux abstraits comme du Van Gogh, par exemple, c'est un peu mieux encore.
Realistic pictures of nature were highly effective and greatly reduced the number of injections from $45,000 to $18,400, which means that photo hanging there, which was bought on the internet, saved about 24,000 euros a year. And here's the photo. Just a big poster. It costs $25 on the internet, and the payback time is 8 hours of clinical time, which means in a 24-hour day, it has enough savings to pay for 3 of the pictures.
Donc, dans une journée de 24 heures, on peut payer 3 photos, et donc on économise environ $26,000 par an.
The growing research evidence showing that gardens in nature improve health outcomes in general or somatic hospitals has clearly helped to strengthen the case for providing gardens in psychiatric facilities. In Sweden, where I live, and throughout Scandinavia, every country, Norway, Denmark, Finland, virtually all psychiatric hospitals built in recent years have a number of gardens and have gone to some length to expose patients, provide contact with nature.
En Scandinavie, les hôpitaux construits récemment offrent des jardins dans toutes les nouvelles structures.
The Scandinavians have an advantage in architecture relative to France or other countries with large psychiatric facilities. The size of hospitals is smaller, ranging from, in new hospitals, about 75 beds to at most 125 beds.
Les structures en psychiatrie en Scandinavie sont beaucoup plus petites, de l'ordre de 75 lits par structure.
This makes it much easier for designers and clinicians to create facilities that are low and where it's easy to create the architecture and gardens combination in ways that are easily accessible by patients without needing escort by busy staff.
Ce qui facilite donc la construction pour les architectes et d'établissements avec accès direct au jardin, peu d'étages élevés et qui ne nécessitent pas aux soignants d'accompagner les patients dans le jardin.
In this Swedish hospital, which first opened in 2006, each ward has 14 patients, and each ward has immediate access, not through a locked door, an unlocked door, to a garden.
Dans cet hôpital, chaque service de psychiatrie a 14 patients et chaque service a accès à sa propre cour non verrouillée, ce jardin non verrouillé.
Staff can observe the patients, of course, for safety purposes in the garden. And each ward garden is designed differently.
Le personnel peut ainsi observer les patients dans le jardin depuis les PC infirmiers.
So it's become easier and more straightforward to make a clinical argument in psychiatry for providing patients with gardens because of evidence showing reduction of stress, of aggressive behavior, increased satisfaction, and this is increasingly important, a better, less stressful environment for staff.
Et l'importance aussi, ça a été mesuré, donc cette étude a mesuré les bénéfices pour les patients, mais également pour le personnel soignant, qui a vraiment fait diminuer le stress au niveau des équipes.
So here's an example of one of these hospitals. This one happens to have 2 levels. The ward centers are here, Each has access to a courtyard garden, again, easy in a low building.
Donc cet hôpital a 2 étages et on voit que chaque service en jaune a accès directement à un jardin.
Many of the older Scandinavian hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, have multiple levels, up to 10 or more.
La plupart des anciens hôpitaux psychiatriques avaient 10 niveaux, 10 étages à peu près.
Often there is a garden on the ground level.
Souvent il y avait un jardin au rez-de-chaussée.
They are always locked and never used.
Ils étaient toujours fermés et jamais utilisés.
So one can say in Northern Europe, North America, and I think this holds for Australia, the trend is very much to encourage nature in healthcare. But let me emphasize this, encourage nature in psychiatric facilities. But let me emphasize, nearly all countries, including Sweden or America, have used nature passively. They make it possible for patients to wander out, and they expect the patient to be relaxed, which they are. But they are not involving the garden more actively in the therapeutic or care processes.
Jusqu'à présent, l'utilisation des jardins était faite de manière passive, c'est-à-dire qu'on pensait que le fait d'être exposé à la nature d'une manière passive, sans interagir avec elle, permettait d'apaiser le patient. Et ceci est valable aussi en Amérique du Nord et en Australie.
This is where what you are doing at Saint-Étienne is so important. It really is innovative, to my knowledge, from an international perspective. It's the first time that I know that a really serious attempt has been made to use a garden both passively for patients, but also to integrate it into the care process and the weekly protocol for treating patients.
Ce qui est pratiqué ici à Saint-Étienne est très innovant pour le professeur Ulrich parce que c'est une manière donc passive et active d'utiliser les bénéfices du jardin, c'est-à-dire autant d'une manière passive et autant d'une manière active avec les médiations thérapeutiques au niveau du jardin.
So this is, going back, it's a typical kind of design in Scandinavia with the courtyard secure garden, a low building, the center of the ward, an atrium to bring in light and have plants in the middle of the department. And nature, of course, includes sunlight. And this is how the buildings can look from the outside. Again, lower rise, often single story. Now, serious scientific research from the Netherlands showing that locked and inaccessible gardens can actually worsen stress in patients and worsen aggressive behavior in psychiatric units. This is research by Professor van der Schaft and her colleagues, a study of 196 wards in Dutch facilities.
Donc une étude hollandaise sur 196 unités psychiatriques.
Like older Swedish hospitals, these are multi-story facilities, and the gardens are always locked and not used in many cases. If they're used, it's quite a different story.
Donc des jardins verrouillés et inutilisés aussi.
So again, ideally speaking, in designing, gardens should be, I think, accessible to patients without needing escort from busy staff. If one has 8 levels to take patients who are experiencing psychosis or are seriously ill, often these patients must be escorted individually. You can't put a group in an elevator and take them to the garden.
Oui, c'est difficile d'escorter parfois les gens un à un et c'est pas facile non plus de les emmener en groupe.
So there are some advantages if one is building smaller hospitals, such as those in Northern Europe and Scandinavia. What are some trends? Here is a relatively new forensic psychiatric facility in Sweden that is for psychiatric patients who have committed very serious often very violent criminal offenses.
Voilà un hôpital récent en Suède pour des patients psychiatriques qui ont commis des crimes très violents.
This is Rogården, the name. It's one of only 3 very high security facilities in the Nordic or Scandinavian countries.
C'est une des 3 institutions haute sécurité dans les pays nordiques.
So imagine the worst crimes, and there are people inside who have carried them out and also have mental illness. Again, following this pattern, though it's high security, the basic part is single story. What you saw was the administration.
Donc on a vu le bâtiment administratif tout à l'heure, mais malgré la haute sécurité, on est toujours sur un bâtiment à un étage.
The entire building is raised a meter off the ground by a wall of stones.
Il y a un mur de pierre pour rehausser le bâtiment d'1 mètre,
To prevent trucks ramming through windows, for example.
pour empêcher par exemple des camions de se projeter dans les vitres.
The wards reach out like arms to embrace a secure central green area.
Ce sont des bras qui sécurisent, qui accompagnent.
Each ward has immediate ground level access through, in the daytime, an unlocked door. At night, for these patients, it's locked.
Chaque unité a accès à un jardin qui est non verrouillé la journée, bien sûr verrouillé la nuit.
One of the courtyards, just before the patients are being moved in, the vegetation is fresh. It's much bigger now.
Donc là c'est tout juste planté et ça a bien sûr beaucoup grandi.
And in the snow, the gardens are heavily used in Swedish psychiatric hospitals during all seasons.
Les patients les utilisent pendant toutes les saisons.
I think smoking is perhaps more discouraged in Swedish hospitals, even psychiatric hospitals, than in perhaps France.
Dans les hôpitaux suédois, on décourage les patients de fumer, plus peut-être qu'ici.
Patients who smoke walk across. You can see the umbrella. That's a smoking station where they can press a button to light a cigarette.
Donc ils peuvent appuyer sur un bouton sous cette petite ombrelle là pour allumer leur cigarette.
It keeps all smoke away from the entrance to the garden.
Et ça localise la fumée dans cet endroit.
There's horticulture therapy,
Il y a des activités d'hortithérapie.
and despite the very high security, these are all single rooms, and probably 85% have truly beautiful views of nature. Now, can we be more scientific about psychiatric gardens and about psychiatric architecture and put them together and study the effect of different combinations on only one important category of clinical outcomes, and that is aggressive behavior. This is based on research that was published last year. I did with my colleagues based on data from Swedish psychiatric hospitals.
Donc il a publié cette étude l'année dernière basée sur des données psychiatriques en Suède.
We began by recognizing that traditional theory in psychiatry contends that stress triggers aggression, not only in psychiatric patients, but everyone. It's human nature in some way.
Oui, le stress déclenche l'agressivité chez tout le monde.
So this theory, which comes from different countries from psychiatry, first contends the experience of psychopathology is itself intensely stressful, and then being admitted and locked up worsens the stress for the patient. Then traditional theory holds the patient is locked up in an environment that further worsens their stress. The physical environment of psychiatry traditionally is seen as part of the problem, not part of the solution. There's a lack of gardens. They're often noisy. There's crowding. This further worsens stress and worsens, therefore, aggressive behavior. Again, the physical environment explicitly or implicitly is considered to contribute to problems and worsen outcomes. My colleagues and I thought, well, we should turn this on its head. After all, much is known from decades of research in fields such as environmental psychology about how to design deliberately to significantly reduce stress.
Surtout, principalement en psychiatrie, les modalités d'hospitalisation étaient génératrices de stress elles-mêmes, mais également les différents éléments qui étaient sur la slide précédente, comme le bruit, etc., favorisaient et majoraient le stress. Les propositions proposées ici, les jardins, chambres individuelles et insonorisation, ont permis de diminuer le stress. Voilà.
So now the stress patient is locked up in a facility deliberately designed to reduce stress. Prominent gardens, single bedrooms, less noise, it's quiet, and other factors. This reduces stress and reduces aggression, according to this theory, which we've tested now with data in Sweden.
Vous allez traduire un tout petit peu moins pour pouvoir avancer un petit peu plus si ça vous convient. Ça
Oui,
va?
oui.
Quand c'est écrit.
Compared markers of aggressive behavior that the healthcare authority in Sweden requires all psychiatric facilities to report in the same way. And we studied hospitals that had the same categories of patients and the same acuity levels, the same levels of training in staff, the percent occupancy of beds. We kept the non-environmental factors closely similar, but the hospitals were very different in their physical environments. This hospital, a newer hospital that opened for the first full year was 2007, is one of these low-rise structures, 14 patients per ward. It's designed around a very large combination of living areas. To orient you, the nurses' station is here.
Ça, c'est la station des infirmiers, en rouge.
In Scandinavia, nurses and doctors are encouraged to spend as little time as necessary in the office or behind glass, and as much time as reasonably possible out on the floor with patients, monitoring them directly. They argue that you would not have a pane of break-resistant glass between you, or a partition between you and your patient in your office. Why do this on the ward?
Donc on est encouragé en Suède à passer le plus de temps possible avec les patients et pas derrière le verre, qui ne serait pas une condition normale en consultation.
So the nurse station is not designed, it's designed only for limited observation of people entering the ward through a locked door.
Donc c'est plutôt pour observer les gens qui rentrent dans l'unité à travers la porte fermée.
The nurses are moving around all parts of the floor as our patients, and the nurses have excellent line of sight observation of every part of the ward except for into the patient rooms.
Des bons points de vue d'observation, sauf pour regarder dans les chambres.
They can also observe the garden, and in this design, it's wonderfully easy for patients to access from the living area. They just open the door and
Le
go
jardin
out.
est très accessible, juste en ouvrant une porte.
And so this is one of the types of gardens.
Voilà des jardins.
Now, in addition to having these gardens, the Good Hospital had other architectural factors that are known to help reduce stress and lower aggression.
Mais il y a quelques autres facteurs qui réduisent le stress et l'agression, l'agressivité.
I mentioned daylight, of course, plants inside,
La lumière du jour, des plantes à l'intérieur.
and compared to earlier Swedish or Scandinavian hospitals, a higher proportion of single rooms. France has been, frankly, I think, ahead of Scandinavia and Sweden, for instance, in having single rooms for many years.
Il lui semble que la France est en avance en termes de chambres individuelles par rapport au reste du monde.
So it's not only the garden, some of the architecture is important here as well. We compared this with older hospitals that are often multi-story with the same number of patients, sometimes fewer, but dependent on corridors with no easy access at all to gardens. In fact, in some cases, no gardens at all. This is an example of one. Based on the theory and lots of measurements of these hospitals, we forecast that the new hospital would have less aggression, less aggressive behavior compared to the old hospital it replaced. Now, the same staff, about 92% of the staff of the new hospital worked in the old hospital. Here's what happened to the proportion of patients, compulsory care patients, who required forced injections for aggressive behavior. Compared to control facilities, was about the same for the old hospital 12 months before the new hospital. The new hospital cut the proportion significantly. What about the control? Nothing changed in the environment. There was no new building, same care protocols, same drug protocols, same overall everything, occupancy rates. And to my knowledge, this was a pattern of drifting up across Swedish hospitals that were older.
Dans les hôpitaux à contrôle, donc plus d'injections au fil du temps, tandis que dans ce nouvel hôpital qui donc, a remplacé un ancien hôpital, on a vu une diminution du nombre d'injections nécessaires.
What about the number of injections per patient? Now, because we've seen that the proportion of patients in new hospital was significantly reduced, we might not expect the average number of injections per patient to go down much for those who received them. But it went down a little bit. Control hospital, remember, increased in the proportion of patients receiving injections and increased significantly also in the number of injections. Ooh, this is the kind of data that healthcare safety, patient quality people, outcome quality people take seriously.
Voilà, des données que les régulateurs trouvent intéressantes.
Swedish hospitals are required to report any use of restraint, physical restraints. We have good data for old hospital, not for the control hospital, and the same staff using the same protocols, but a new facility with the same types of patients, same occupancy level, used half as many restraints. Well, this creates a powerful argument based on evidence, a very strong argument that the new facility really helped reduce aggressive behavior and saved care costs money.
Voilà la preuve que le nouveau bâtiment, avec des éléments de nature, réduit l'agressivité d'une part et aussi économise de l'argent au système de santé.
It should be emphasized, we cannot link these benefits only to the gardens, because there were other positive aspects of the architecture in New Hospital.
Ces bienfaits ne sont pas tous liés au jardin, puisqu'il y avait aussi d'autres éléments environnementaux qui avaient été changés.
These reductions in aggressive behavior are associated with a combined series of interventions, but I believe, and the clinicians in the New Hospital believe, that the most important single factor by far are the gardens.
Il y a de nombreux facteurs, mais pour lui et pour les cliniciens, le facteur le plus important reste le jardin.
Now we're coming to the end, the last part. We have to move a bit quickly. We're running out of time.
This will interest everybody.
But let's face it, it's not only patients who need relaxation, it's staff. Everywhere in somatic medicine and everywhere in psychiatry, internationally, in every country I know, burnout is a problem, and it appears to be getting worse, and it creates serious problems such as shortages of nurses and physicians. Working with a team in the western U.S., we were able to obtain 2 large grants. First, to build a garden immediately adjacent to 2 very high-level trauma facilities, one for cardiovascular intensive care, the other for neuro or brain trauma.
Du coup, deux jardins ont été construits dans les services de neurologie et de cardio.
Let's say more about why burnout is such a problem. Much research has documented the problem. Little research has documented solutions. There's a lack of research.
Beaucoup de documents montrent donc le phénomène du burn-out, mais peu proposent de solutions.
Could gardens be part of a solution for staff? Internationally, data in advanced healthcare systems, several countries, indicate that on average 86% of nurses working in somatic units with very sick patients, critical care units, experience at least one major component of burnout. About 1/3 are seriously burned out and have multiple components of burnout. Now, as burnout increases, work performance goes down. For example, in somatic care, as burnout increases, hand washing goes down. As burnout increases, infection transmission increases. As burnout increases in nurses and doctors, medical errors increase. Lots of research.
Là où il y a burn-out, il y a diminution du lavage des mains, il y a également une diminution plus d'erreurs médicales et surtout une augmentation des maladies nosocomiales.
And as burnout increases, the costs of care increase. Well, what to do about it? And it also causes nurses to leave the profession in a large number, and it presents serious risks to healthcare staff internationally for developing post-traumatic stress, alcoholism, drug addiction, and in some countries, including Scandinavia, somewhat higher rates of suicide. Could a garden be part of the solution, not only for personnel, but for very stressed family members visiting their loved ones in neurotrauma who've been horribly injured in automobile accidents or mountain climbing accidents? But our main focus here today is on benefits for staff. And the garden was designed expressly to be stress reducing for passive users.
Les jardins ont été dessinés surtout pour réduire le stress des soignants.
Now, evidence based on other garden research suggests that gardens must be close to where the staff are located. Nurses are busy. They don't have 15 minutes to walk to a garden. It has to be within about a minute at the most. So these gardens are very close on a rooftop to the workplaces. Gardens are much more effective in reducing stress, and a lot of this research is from Europe, if they have very prominent nature designed in informal ways, without a lot of hardscapes such as concrete. Of course, there must be some for patients in wheelchairs. But on the whole, the implication is that very formal gardens, Le Nôtre, for example, was not designing for stress reduction, but to elevate a French king. This is just stress reduction. And a more informal style of gardening works better. So on an old rooftop on a second floor that happened to be very close, we created a small garden of about 500 square meters.
Les jardins à la française, tels dessinés par le nôtre, étaient faits pour élever le roi et non pas diminuer le stress.
We used the evidence to plant the garden, design it, with a very participatory design process, and bravo to the earlier presentation. Of course it should be participatory, and this with evidence. So choices of comfortable seating, shade, access to privacy, or people can be together, and it should be very close to the workspaces for nurses. Our goal for the nurse study was to measure two things. Compare the effect of, this was serious, tried to be serious medical research. I think it is. Like a medication study, it was a randomized trial. Some nurses were randomly assigned to take a break of at least 25 minutes a day in the garden. Some, if they went to the garden, they could not go to an indoor break room. If they were randomly assigned to an indoor break room, then they should stay away from the garden. And we wanted to know what would happen to burnout levels. We knew the nurses began with, we measured that they were experiencing burnout to some degree, above average, as critical care nurses do everywhere. We wanted to know if over 6 weeks or 2 months of daily breaks, perhaps the garden would help bring down burnout. And we also wanted to know what happened during each break. What happens when you take a coffee break or go to your nurse room? There's no research, so we wanted to find out. We measured stress symptoms. We measured both burnout over every few weeks, and we measured each nurse reported stress symptoms at the beginning and the end of each individual break. What happened? Oh, here's the break rooms. Best I've seen anywhere. They're very large. They have full kitchens. Perfection. We're using a high standard of comparison for the garden. They don't get better. Or choose to be surrounded by flowers. What happened in each 25 minutes? The good news is that both the indoor break room and the garden reduced nurse stress. The higher the bar, the more stress reduction, immediate in the moment stress. So for instance, those who went to the garden experienced even more reduction of anger, more reduction in worry, and far more reduction of feeling tired than those who had breaks in indoor environments, even though, well, the indoor environment worked, good news, but the garden worked a lot better, in fact, significantly so better in a scientific sense. Now, that's just one break, and it doesn't get to the ultimate objective of burnout. A few minutes of restoration from stress is not the same as altering one's ongoing day-to-day condition. This is what happened, and this is rather notable news in the critical care community, and this paper has been invited to be presented at international nursing and critical care conferences. At the end of 6 weeks, there are 3 key components of burnout, 2 especially important ones in medicine, and this applies just as well to France as it does to America or Sweden. Emotional exhaustion went down greatly over time with daily breaks in the garden. The indoor breaks daily had no effect whatsoever on nurse burnout. None. Also, daily breaks in the garden significantly reduced another bad dimension of burnout called depersonalization. This is where clinicians cope with stress by distancing themselves from patients and their fellow workers. Patients become more like objects. Workers are a bit objectified too, and that reduces social support in the workplace, increasing turnover. Now, can you produce these reductions in other ways, and how much does it cost? Yeah, Norway has done it. Norway's done it permanently, more or less. How have they done it? What's their secret formula? They have reduced the number of hours each nurse works per week and shift. Number 2, they have reduced the number of patients each nurse is responsible for. Number 3, they have increased the recuperation time between shifts. And number 4,
Donc en Norvège, ils ont réussi à pallier le burn-out en réduisant le temps de travail de présence des infirmières, en augmentant la durée des repos entre les services, en moins de patients et des temps de récupération plus importants et un salaire élevé.
so it's effective but incredibly expensive, and no Western country I know of except for Norway can afford it. So we can then do a very conservative cost analysis. Let's be medical accountants. The cost of the garden was $273,000 US. It takes part of a maintenance person's salary a year to maintain it. Taking data from several studies of links between burnout and nurse loss or turnover, we could say, given the size of these units, at least ultra-conservative, 1.5 fewer nurses per year would quit. In fact, a reasonable estimate would be 4 or 5 a year fewer, and we have to move quickly. This creates savings, and the time estimated in a very conservative sense, approved by the hospital management and accountants, is 2.2 years. And the garden, given the reductions in burnout, can also be plausibly expected to increase patient safety and outcomes, quality in critical care, which is virtually priceless. Let's end with a glimpse of nurses who work in a very modernist, huge hospital in central Copenhagen, and only a bit of green, and they run for it in their breaks. And finally, merci beaucoup.
Merci. Est-ce que vous avez un petit peu de questions? C'est ça, on a un peu de temps pour les questions ou... Non? 5 minutes? 5 minutes?
Alors, c'est ça, une question à celui qui dégaine le plus. S'il y en a, on va un peu là, ici.
Ah.
Hello, Doctor. Thank you very much for your intervention. I'm a former colleague of Dr. Polsky who's doing research on images in hospital rooms.
Okay.
Which brings me to ask the question, what do you think of virtual reality? Because some hospitals will, of course, make the argument, budget this, budget that. And so I was wondering if there's any research on virtual reality.
Virtual reality.
Oui, donc la réalité virtuelle, est-ce que ça pourrait marcher?
Est-ce que la réalité virtuelle pourrait aussi fonctionner pour réduire le stress?
It's a common question, and it's an important question. Is a simulation enough for real nature? Actually, there have been practical uses of virtual reality with goggles, with a walk through the woods or flowers that are effective during certain procedures where real nature cannot be provided to the patient. With some patients, many patients have a problem of disorientation with virtual reality. And the most realistic three-dimensional interactive virtual reality actually appears to make many patients and non-patients motion sick.
Donc, il y a des études qui montrent que ça peut être intéressant, la réalité virtuelle avec des lunettes pour certains patients, mais malheureusement ça crée pas mal de nausées en fait.
It's relevant to note that considerable research shows that a nature view out your window in a high-stress workplace or in a hospital can reduce stress. But actually going out and interacting with a garden is significantly more effective.
Donc même si regarder par la fenêtre une scène de nature et a des bénéfices, des bienfaits, vraiment aller dans la nature et interagir avec elle a encore plus d'effets.
Merci au professeur Lebric et surtout à Isabelle et Alexia qui nous ont traduit à la volée. Je passe la parole juste à Yann pour les parties logistiques et sur le jardin.
Désolé d'avoir été un peu frustrant sur les échanges avec le professeur Lebric. Je propose éventuellement, sous réserve de le laisser un peu manger tranquille, que vous puissiez l'interpeller avec la directrice pour échanger par le repas. Donc le déjeuner va se délocaliser sur le jardin des milices, donc c'est à une dizaine de minutes à pied. Je propose qu'on fasse une cohorte. On va rentrer normalement par le portail qui va être ouvert, donc le portail va être ouvert, on rentre tous sur le jardin et le buffet est installé dans une salle qui est juste dans le jardin. On propose que un peu alternative, voilà,